Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.
All right, let's see if we have Pastor Richards on with us. Hello, good morning.
Good morning. You're a little bit low this morning.
You're not hearing me clearly?
Not as I can hear you, but not as well as on other days. So I hope I'm not losing my hearing.
No,
is that one of these symptoms or something?
The symptoms of what? The symptoms of what, good sir? Good morning. Good morning to you, my friend.
Good morning to everyone. And listen, I listened in a little bit on the discussion. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to follow everything this morning. I do try because I suspect sometimes I am expected to respond, coming in the closing segment to respond to what has gone before.
Exactly.
And, so I responsibly try to listen, but this morning was not one of those mornings when I could get everything. But I do know that the main item on the table was the matter regarding the returning of sailors
That's
to
right.
Vincents and the Grenadines. And,
Yes. And where the cost should lie and so forth.
Frankly speaking, I for whatever little I heard, I'm like, oh my word, I'm probably expected to give a response or take a position or something. And unfortunately, I can't, Mario. I really can't. This is one of those things that I don't even have much of a clue as to all that is involved, and because I don't have a clue of all that is involved, it will be not only premature, it actually probably would be irresponsible for me to weigh in on this matter, and that's something that I have learned too. I am not going to know everything about everything, but at least I ought to know reasonably enough about something before I want to give any kind of structured opinion. Once I don't know enough about something, I either that I am being duplicitous, I'm fooling the public, making a fool of myself, or something if I venture to say and talk about things that I don't know much about. Thing is, though, I have a dog in this fight. Well, let me not know that. Bad. Take that. I have a horse in this race regarding sailors coming back home. A family who are sailors stranded should have been home so long ago.
Right.
And they're not home. They have family waiting and, close family. I have in this. I have friends also, male and female, out there that we care about, family friends, and we would want to have them here. So I am not totally detached from this matter altogether, even if I don't have, the firm opinion as to how the government should go about this. At the same time, I am not pretending that I am detached. Like I said, I have a horse in this race. But the reason why I am not going to be as hasty as others who may have called in and ventured their own opinion is because I don't know all that is involved. I have a lot of questions. And maybe when these questions are answered, I'll be in a better position. Mario, if you, as I ask these questions, if you or Daniil or others could help me answer these, I'll be happy. And I probably would come off a little bit early so we could get some answers by those who are in the know. For example, I heard that if you are COVID-free, that the cruise ship would be sending you home. If you test for COVID and you are positive, that you will not be sent home. I mean, that's what I heard. But my question is that really true? Is it really true that only people who test negative for COVID will be allowed to return home? I just want to know. To me, that will inform my. I'm telling you, that will inform my answer. That will make me think differently about quarantine and all of that.
Right.
If they have a clean bill of health coming home, the last thing before they came, they were checked and they were COVID free. Also, how does that pan out? If that is true, how come I heard that some of the people who tested positive here in St. Vincent were returning sailors? So that doesn't seem to add up. So is it true that some of the people who came home and tested positive were returning sailors? Well, if that is the case, then that debunks the whole idea that only COVID-free sailors are returning home. So that really needs clarification, and I can't answer or give an opinion until I get an answer for that. Also, I heard some talk this morning at the time I was listening about the International Labour Organization, ILO, and that they have maritime rules related to seafaring workers and passengers, but in this case, labor organization would refer more on the labor side of things, which would be those employed by the maritime agencies. So, I mean, I hear a lot of that, but this is the first time I am really keying into this. And a lot of people who have been saying things about sailors returning home, do you know what the ILO says? Because I don't. What is the specific ruling, law, guideline of the ILO related to the responsibility of these maritime companies vis-a-vis sailors or workers returning home? It's one thing to say, ILO says, ILO has a convention. ILO, tell me what the International Labour Organization says so I can see how it applies. So don't just throw that out there as a red herring. Well, I should not say that those who are throwing it out there doing it as a red herring. I just don't know what it says. And if this is a variable, if the ILO ruling, if the ILO convention is a significant variable, before I pitch in and make a statement and come to a conclusion and say whether the government is right or the government is wrong, I need to be informed by what the ILO says specific to the situation. So I can't give an opinion until I know that. Do you know what the ILO says specific to the situation that can apply?
No, I do not.
Well, that's the thing. The other thing that I'm concerned about, that I can't come to a conclusion and pick a side or whatever, like some people are becoming so polarized, vehemently polarized on this issue. I can't do that. What are the limits? I presume that these sailors, men and women, have some kind of medical coverage, medical insurance, matters related to their health insurance, whatever you want to call it. With these companies, I presume that. But what is the extensiveness? How extensive? What's the extent of this medical coverage? What does it cover? What does it not cover? I mean, what expenses are taken care of? What considerations are taken care of? What are the nuances? What are the specifics of this coverage? I presume that the coverage is in place, but I don't know the extent of this coverage. And could it be possible, I'm just asking, could it be possible that there are implications for this quarantining of sailors, that the implications are contingent on the kind of medical coverage or health coverage that is already in place by the employers? I don't know. So again, before I venture opinion and talk as if I know stuff, let me know about the medical coverage. Those of you who are venturing opinions, tell me what you have found out about the medical coverage. Maybe this could be a point, maybe it is not a point. And the other thing too, we are focused here on St. Vincent's position and putting it out as a unilateral position. St. Vincent is the only country in the world. I heard Mr. Weeks say, somebody said, of 500 countries, and I laughed, and he was right to correct that. But St. Vincent is the only country in the world, and certainly, even if we get the world, we are dealing Caribbean here. Okay, so let's focus on our part of the world, the Caribbean. Is St. Vincent the only country in the world that is in the Caribbean that is adopting this position? Is St. Vincent's position absolutely? Notice my words. Is St. Vincent's position absolutely a unilateral position? So Ralph Gonsalves and his government, they're the only ones in the entire Caribbean that is taking this route of negotiation with the cruise ship, because I am thinking, and that's a question, by the way. Let me put it out as a question. Are we the only ones taking that position? And if that is the case, how likely it is that the cruise ship are going to unilaterally deal with country after country after country rather than having one global position on this matter? If you follow what I mean, are they going to have one set of negotiation with Barbados, one set of negotiation with St. Vincent, or should there be a blanket policy? Mario, you probably, and others of you listening know, that most organizations work by blanket policies. This is how we are going to do things. In extenuating circumstances, there might be allowances. But I am wondering whether or not St. Vincent's position is unilateral, or whether or not the cruise ship companies, not just the one currently being negotiated with, but the other cruise ship companies, are going to have a policy and position with respect to this, or whether or not they're going to negotiate separately with 10 different countries in the Caribbean.
Right.
These are things that we have to understand, Mario. We can't just presume that St. Vincent is the only one. We can't presume that St. Vincent is unique in this case. We can't just presume St. Vincent is the only country that we're going to have returning sailors. There are other countries. Is it going to be a multilateral position taken or a unilateral position taken? These are things that we need to know before I come to that kind of judgment. I have some other considerations too, so hear me out, right? Because I heard somebody allude to the fact that sailors are not the only ones out there wanting to return home, but for some reason we are focused only on the sailors. They have to come home and they're going to be in quarantine and it's going to be a high bill. What about the other people? Are they not Vincents too? Just asking, are they not Vincents too? So it's only sailors that we're going to be concerned about. So if there's a policy that applies to paid quarantine, for those who are arguing that the government should pay the quarantine cost for all the sailors returning home, are you saying that the government should pay the quarantine costs? We have a number of students out there also. If we can get them home, they would want to be home with their families.
Right.
So are we making the same argument that the government should pay? So I'm trying to get that clear.
Right.
If
it's just for the sailors, or if it's a blanket thing for everyone.
Right, and because I'm listening to the arguments, I would just want this clarified, because it would seem to me unfair if you're making a strong argument that the government should pay for the sailors, but the government should not pay for anyone else to that extent. And further, I also heard the argument, the reason why the government should pay for the sailors is because they significantly remunerate, and the word is remunerate rather than remunerate, as I heard a lot of people saying, is spelled with an R-E-M, remunerate. So make that correction, please. But they're the ones who send monies home, X amount of dollars, and the students, basically, that's an outflow. So their liability, the sailors, man, they send monies in, so they are an asset. So is that how we those who are talking about citizens, and the government has a responsibility for citizens, so only citizens who contribute should receive the higher care? Is that what we are really projecting for this kind of society? I'm just asking, is it that true that people who contribute to the economy are more significant and more deserving than others who at their particular juncture of life represents an outflow of our dollars? So therefore we should give the paid quarantine, the government should pay for the quarantine for the sailors, but not them students, because they're an outflow. Is that the argument that is being made? This is a question that has to be asked. And as I project this down the road, how could the current negotiations affect the future employment of sailors? If a country is playing hardball, I don't know, I'm asking, if a country is playing hardball and taking a unilateral position as opposed to a multilateral position, would it affect, therefore, the employment opportunities of people employed by that company down the road? Because, listen, the government, your government hardballed me. I'd rather deal with a more pliable, collaborative government down the road. So this is a question I have to ask. Again, I am only asking questions. And then the last thing, I heard some people positing that the whole idea of a shared responsibility. Now, I happen to know that someone who was out there on the ship actually said to me, I would come home, even before all of this got started, I would come home, I would find a hotel room, I would pay for my everything, I would self-quarantine, and there are probably people out there who are willing to pay all of it, sailors who are willing to pay all of it, because the value of being home with their family, at $2,100, they would spend that, they would spend it in a heartbeat to be home with their family, because the value of being with family at this time it is a very significant point, far outweighs their $2,100 $100, so they're not so stingy as to try to hold on to a $2,100 in their pocket when their families are here waiting on them, and they're willing to come home and spend the quarantine period, so that over this extended period that they could be home with their family. And a $2,100, which is what, $600 US, $700 US dollars, they would pay that. They would pay that. So we can't just presume that they as stakeholders are not willing to put anything to it. And we can presume that the government will not put a single penny to this. The government has already indicated, as far as I know and heard, that they're willing to bear a bit of the cost. And I think that the people who are positing the idea of a shared responsibility, giving the sailors opportunities to pay into this, giving the government an opportunity to have a share, and the cruise ship company to have a share in this. I think the idea of shared responsibility is at least something to be considered. The question is it viable? So those are I don't have an answer. I just wanted to ask those questions on the matter this morning.
And make everyone think.
Well, I'm actually thinking. And before we begin to take sides and polarize this thing, think through, and when you have answers to these questions, they will inform the position that you take.
Definitely so, but there is some merit to having a certain expectation of a government to help secure their people.
I ask a question: should this assistance by the government be limited to a single sector and category? That's what I'm saying.
I'm
so
saying
how universal
it, yeah.
should this be? Should it be, in other words, the argument therefore should not be let's argue for our sailors coming home, but all Vincents, and therefore, if that is the case, the one again that goes to the question of shared responsibility is 100% responsibility to be taken up only by the government in all Vincies returning home, all Vincies returning home who need to be quarantined. So again, before we begin to pigeonhole our discussion, look at things at a wider perspective, which is what I try to do. Look at this from a wider perspective. The policy that you want to again, policies, you don't have the liberty with policies to be as selective with them and partially apply them here and not partially apply and not apply them universally, because when you have partially applied policies, then you beg for people to begin to criticize you for partisanship, because then you are saying you are doing this for one category of people, but you're not doing it for the others. So your policy in a matter like this has to be universally applicable, and if it is not universally applicable, then you have to rethink it. You have to think how you're going to put something down and take something as precedent that can be applied across the board and not only be applied to those who remunerate monies back home. That's and then you open yourself to, it's a money thing. So you know what I mean? You pat my back, I pat yours. You pay, you send home money. Okay, you get taken care of. You get hotel room. Others who don't send money, to wherever, to damnation with you. You understand what I'm saying?
Right.
So I hear and I listen, but I have questions. I don't have answers. I'm bright enough to have answers for stuff like this at all. On another matter, because I'm almost out of time, but this is really, really significant that I'm about to say here. I have been listening for 3 or 4 weeks on those who have criticized St. Vincent's government related to the responses to COVID. More than anything else, those who have criticized have accused the government of being very cavalier and what was it? I heard many times, we jamming still, we don't, the government doesn't care, St. Vincent jamming still. And I am getting the impression, Mary, this will take about 3 minutes, I'm getting the impression that we are so polarized in responses that we have become absurd. And the two absurdities that I see, basically those who are on the side of a total lockdown, because a total lockdown has the appearance of being absolutely responsible, and so just lock the place down. And at the other extreme, those who are cavalier enough to say, man, just open the place up and anything goes. So those are two extreme polarized positions. And I actually feel that the more responsible thing, not just for St. Vincent, but for governments around the world, is to be somewhere between those two extreme poles, where you have, hear me well, because this might be the first time I'm crystallizing like this, where there are objective criteria for determining your response. And not necessarily that your response should be a total lockdown, but somewhere between the extremes of a total lockdown and a total freeing up of the economy and of the country. That somewhere between those two extremes you should lie, which is where St. Vincent is, by the way. St. Vincent is not on a total lockdown. Neither is St. Vincent on the page of business as usual. From the get-go, St. Vincent has been between, total lockdown, total freedom. The pendulum swings from some countries have gone closer towards the pole of total lockdown, and other countries have gone closer to the pole of totally freeing up the thing. I think where you are is not a cookie-cut position, but where you are between those two extremes of the pendulum should be determined by your risk assessment, because I've always believed that risk mitigation should be related to risk assessment, and there are some brilliant, well, I shouldn't say brilliant, that's tongue-in-cheek. There are some people out there who want to divorce and separate risk mitigation from risk assessment. It's the first time in history I am ever hearing that kind of idea, that risk mitigation should be separated from risk assessment. I don't, and the problem is, as I close, the problem is, in all of this, I've listened, and as a math, I taught math at different levels for a long time. As a math guy, I don't think people are doing the math. The risk assessment is warped in many countries, significantly so in the U.S., but the risk assessment is warped by the denominator. People who do fractions will get me. The risk assessment is, we get the numerator, the news, everybody. Put the numerator out there every day. Numerator being how many people die from COVID. That is how many people are hospitalized by COVID, how many people die from COVID. That is a fairly easy and specific numerator to get, and they're not making a lot of mistakes when it comes to the numerator. They are making significant mistakes when it comes to denominator. And for the greater part, because their testing has been so limited to 1 to 2, the Americas are probably up to nearly 3% of their population being tested. 97% of the population is not tested. And therefore, the denominator as to how many people actually are infected with COVID, that is absolutely unknown. In fact, it has been so minimized, it has been so small, the math students will get me. That denominator is so small that when you compare it and divide it ratio form into the known numerator, you are getting a higher death rate than is actual. So the death rate that is being reported out there related to COVID is a false indicator. And because you have a false indicator, you have a faulty risk assessment going on, and you are going to take extreme measures because you are guided by a false indicator. I'll have more to say about this tomorrow.
All right.
All right, Pastor. Thank you.
All right, take care.
Let's check in with the doc and look at things with a wider lens. Pastor Richards on OMG.